Hi guys, it's Karen Teague here and welcome to Horsing Around NZ. This week we're off to the North Island's scenic Central Plateau for a look at the Kaimanawa Wild Horse Muster. Plus we've got vet advice, expert opinion, top tips and a whole heap of other horse related goodies. Tighten your girth and shorten your stirrups, we're Horsing Around NZ. Our Kaimanawa Odyssey begins with an early morning pickup from Waiouru by the friendly local Department of Conservation staff. These guys are responsible not only for the muster itself, but also for looking after us observers in case we do anything silly like step on a bomb, which is not quite as silly as it sounds. This is part of the New Zealand Army training area, and although it's not exactly central city Baghdad, unexploded shells are not altogether uncommon. Duly warned, we drive onward and it's not long before we catch a glimpse of our first wild horses. Being close to camp, these guys see their fair share of military action, so our polite white dock van doesn't really raise an eyebrow.
That stallion's rather handsome. Take him home. Woof. He's a handsome lad, that one.
Yep, so although I promised my long-suffering partner I wouldn't come home with any new additions to our animal family, I could already feel those wild horses tugging at my heartstrings. As we came over the ridge, the valley below was breathtaking. Almost as breathtaking as the wind, but being a true blue professional, I braved the elements in the name of Horsing Around NZ.
We're now in the middle of the very windy home valley with the Moafongo Valley behind us. Now the majority of horses are going to be coming out of this area. It's quite interesting talking to the Department of Conservation and how they do manage the muster of the horses and certainly want to keep the genetics as true to the Kaimanawa breed as possible. And so very soon we're going to be seeing some of these amazing bands of horses, as they're known, which looks like family groups to us, coming out of this very valley.
Back in the dock van, I attend to some urgent grooming issues. People had warned me it could get breezy, but this was hairdo hell.
It was a bird's nest.
And as we headed toward our destination, we were honoured with the presence of more wild kais nonchalantly crossing our path. Not in the least bit worried about their tangled manes, these gorgeous Kaimanawa creatures are now officially recognised as a distinct breed all of their own. Excited and obviously impatient to exit the vehicle, I finally arrived at our destination.
Standing now in front of the blind, which has been set up by the Army for us to hide in effect, so that when the horses come in over the hill with the helicopters behind them, they won't be spooked by our presence up on the hill. It gives us a great view to show you guys what's going on. But basically the horses will come, there's a scrim netting which then comes firing around the horses to stop them escaping again. And then the musterers get involved and separate stallions and mares and young stock, etc. So we hide up here to keep us out of the view so we don't spook the horses, because it can get quite dangerous in there for the musterers. And it is quite surreal being here and witnessing certain bands, as they're known, or groups of horses dotted around the place, just quietly going about their own business. And knowing that any time now the helicopters might put 3 or 4 of those groups together and bring them into the corral. They did at one stage try to get 170 odd horses together and bring them in one fell swoop, but it didn't go so well. So now they're sticking with 2 or 3 groups at a time into the corral and sort through. So the first lot should be arriving any minute. And I guess we'll have a good look.
Despite the windy conditions, the helicopters had headed out earlier to begin the muster, and it wasn't long before we heard a chopper approaching and saw the first band of horses come into view. As the amazing scene unfolded, our group in the blind were reduced to oohs and ahs of awe. We'll spare you those and give you some tasteful music instead. And we'll have more from the Kaimanawa muster after the break. In the meantime, Irish eyes are smiling. It's time for Bedside Manner with Patrick.
Horses in the wild tend to have a shorter lifespan than domesticated horses. 8 to 10 years up to about 15 years is typical for a wild horse. And the main reason for this is because of their teeth. Horses' teeth are designed to grow continuously throughout their lifespan. They grind down as they grind on their grasses and leaves and so on in the wild. They wear down their teeth, and these teeth continue to grow throughout a horse's life, but eventually they get to a point where there's no growth left in the teeth anymore, and essentially a horse starves to death. So that's the main thing that affects wild horses. Starvation is the main cause of death. Now, in terms of domesticated horses, certain breeds such as thoroughbreds tend to live to approximately 20, whereas hardier crossbreeds can lead lives on into their 30s. We tend to change the diet that they get, so they're fed lush grasses in New Zealand. In other parts of the world, they're fed lots of hay, lots of concentrated feeds. The effect of this basically is that they don't wear down their teeth quite so quickly, and also the fact that we can look after their teeth. We can perform routine dentistry, rasp off any sharp points, and basically care for the teeth in such a way that allows a horse to live to a much greater age. The downside of the diet that we feed them is that higher energy diets can lead to conditions such as equine metabolic syndrome, laminitis, which are diseases that really only affect domesticated horses and not horses in the wild.
Thanks, Patrick. Coming up after the break, Bill Fleury from DOC gives us the background on the Kaimanawa horses. We've got top tips, expert advice and more. Welcome back to Horsing Around NZ. Shortly we'll be back with the Kaimanawa muster, but first it's time for some handy hints with Teague's tips. With the stress of leaving home for a horse and going to a competition and staying the night, the horse can often go off their food and, more worryingly, water. A lot of people do have a problem with this, and you do want to keep the horse's fluids up. So here's a great idea to help tempt them to have that water. If your horse loves carrots, you can drop carrots into a bucket of water. The horse will clearly see these at the bottom of the water, and of course the only way to get to them might be to drink the bucket. If that doesn't work for your horse, another one which almost never fails is to add molasses to your horse's water. It's kind of like chocolate to us. It's a real treat. They love it, it tastes great, and that can often be all it takes to encourage your horse to drink water. But at the end of the day, if you're leaving your horse in a yard and you do leave him with a sugary treat, also make sure he does have a clean bucket of water as well. That way, he's got a choice. When it comes to the 2-yearly Kaimanawa muster, DOC confer with various interest groups, including Forest and Bird, the SPCA, the Kaimanawa Heritage Horse Welfare Society, and the New Zealand Veterinary Association. Now that's a lot of ground to cover, but we were fortunate enough to trap Bill Fleury from DOC during a brief bit of downtime. So I began by quizzing him on the history of the muster.
1997 we had a major muster in here and brought the population down to about 500, but there was also a geographic limitation we put on the herd at that side. All the animals north of a certain line on the ground, we took them away, and then we tried to manage the herd at 500 to the area south of that line, and we've been trying to manage them at that low level ever since. And 4 or 5 years ago we reduced the population further down to 300, and we're managing them at 300 at the moment.
And it's quite interesting to find out where these horses originate from. You've done a bit of research into their genetics and their bloodlines. What have you come up with?
Yeah, well, we know that horses there's been feral horses in this country since 1876. We also know that over the years, the early part of the 1800s and right through into the early part of the 1900s, that horses were the common mode of transport, of course, but horses were lost. Horses that were unwanted were turned out. There were quite a few skirmishes to do with the land wars around here, so horses would have been part of that and lost in those engagements as well. There was also deliberate attempts to try and establish certain bloodlines of horses in here. So we know that sort of history. We know that some people tried to bring Exmoor bloodlines and Welsh bloodlines into here, but we also know that the Army let go all of their cavalry horses here in 1941, and they would have been bigger horses, sort of more thoroughbred, standardbred type. We know that the stations that surround this area would have turned out their horses when they changed from using horses to motorbikes or four-wheel drive.
The sight of wild horses galloping through tussock lands is not something that anyone would forget in a hurry. But one of the other striking aspects of this muster is the sight of choppers herding horses. I asked Bill more about their use.
We've been using helicopters since 1993, which was our first muster in here, and we've taken out something like 2,500 horses from this herd using basically the same technique. We use these small helicopters. They work like sheepdogs basically, and they encourage the horses towards the yards we want them to come.
And as a result, it does minimise the stress put on the horses?
Absolutely, seems to. I mean, you see the horses, they get here, although we've taken them right out of their comfort zone, we've put them under quite a different pressure than they've normally been under, and they're in a new environment for them. They settle very quickly. They're not panicking. They're not charging around the place. So that's our sort of measure that it's probably the least stressful method that we have if we want a live capture.
Why was it decided to keep the population down to 300?
Well, we started coming down. We came down from the 1,700 to the 500 and then down to 300. Coming down to 300 was essentially recognition of the fact that we had high costs associated with each muster. We were having to muster annually. By going down to 300, we were able to bring our muster to once every 2 years. It reduced the number of horses that were actually being taken out to maintain the herd level, just because of the basic maths of the growth in the population. It reduced the number of homes that the rehoming groups had to find, and so reduced the stress on them, reduced costs for the department, and also reduced costs on the horses that actually don't end up with a home. So there's actually less horses that are surplus that have to go to an abattoir. So those are the sort of three factors that drove our decision. We also knew that 300 was adequate to maintain the genetic diversity in this herd.
Well, I think there's another herd coming, so we better run for cover.
Yep.
Thanks, Bill.
Yes.
And as Bill heads back to work, it's time for some professional advice with Experts Angle. We're here today with Chris Barnett of Horse Sports, and he's brought quite a wonderful and exciting looking selection of bits. Now, over the years, the variety of bits gets more and more. Chris, what have we got here?
This is just a small selection of what's available today. Every horse is quite unique, every horse is different, and it's a case of trial and error to find what suits best your horse. So you've got different actions. So you've got your traditional single jointed or snaffle type action, so just a normal nutcracker action. You've got other bits, as in you're going into your double jointed, your French link. I'm a personal fan of French links and KK trainings. They're just a less nutcracker action, just a softer kind of bit. And you can go all the way from a very soft straight bar rubber bit, very flexible, to something that's a lot harder, a lot more.
What is this rather beautiful looking bit?
That's a dear old Waterford. It's been around for a long time. You can get it in different forms, so loose ring, egg butt, hanging cheek, full cheek. It's very much brakes. If you require brakes, that will certainly, or if you've got a horse that's hanging on a little bit, very old, very traditional bit, which is still applicable to some horses today. It's just finding the right one.
Now, what's the difference? Some of these are obviously fixed or egg butt, and others are loose ring. What is the different action in the horse's mouth, and how do you know which one to pick?
A lot of the time it's rider preference. I have noticed that a lot of dressage riders will stay with an egg butt or a fixed ring. It gives a more direct contact to the bit, or a more consistent contact with the bit. With the loose ring, it allows a little bit more play into the bit. Some horses like a little bit more play, and I tend to see a lot more on show jumpers. So yeah, different disciplines, different riders will have a different requirement to what feels good to in their hand, and whether the horse likes that little bit of additional play.
Chris, not all bits are just one metal in the mouth. I notice there's a few with copper. What is the action of copper in the horse's mouth?
Copper's principally in there to encourage a horse to salivate. When a horse salivates, then obviously they need to relax their jaw. Relaxing the jaw will just help in regards to untensing them, keeping the top line a little bit softer.
And when we put copper on our tongue, it's kind of tingly. Does the horse feel the same way?
Pretty much is exactly the same thing. The salivation's encouraged by basically that tingling sensation in their mouth, so whether it be on the tongue or on the bars of their mouth, yeah.
After the break, I fall head over heels in Kaimanawa love. We talk to head vet Nigel Coddington about the muster, plus we check out some horse wakeboarding action. Welcome back to Horsing Around NZ. Before we return to the Kaimanawa muster, it's time for Ask Karen. And this week's letter comes from Nairi Tippett of Dargaville. She writes, almost every time I take my horse out for a ride, he shies at something. Is there any way to prevent this happening?
So many people have a problem with their horse shying. It can be dangerous, it can make us tumble off, and it can just be damn annoying. So how can we fix this problem? Well, there is no real hard and fast rule, but generally speaking, if a horse shies, most of the time they're not being naughty. We've got to remember that a horse is a prey animal, and in the wild, and there's 50 million years of evolution behind the horse, anything that's a little bit spooky that they maybe can't judge could be a potential predator, and this could mean their life's in danger. So the horse's survival mechanism is in fact to shy or spook away from something or just stand and look absolutely terrified. How can we help the horse with this? Well, the best thing is actually not to get angry. The most important thing is to reassure the horse, and the horse picks up from this your confidence in a situation and that you aren't worried, and therefore as the leader of the herd, if you're not worried, then why should the horse be worried? Another really good idea when hacking is purely to see something in the distance that might frighten your horse and just flex him the other way. If he can't see it, then he can't spook at it. And sometimes prevention is better than cure.
Send your questions to horsingaroundnz at country99tv.co.nz or visit our Facebook page. There are always a team of vets present at the muster to keep an eye on the welfare of the horses, a job head vet Nigel Coddington said was made easy by the high level of skill with which the helicopter pilots and stockmen worked. I asked him how the condition of this year's horses was shaping up.
Excellent this year. First of all, I've not seen the feed as good as in this area. I've seen it as high, but no guts in the bottom. We've got a real good guts in the bottom of the grass this year. Secondly, in terms of the horses themselves, nearly every year we muster, there will be 2 or 3 pretty poor condition mares that are in foal, have a foal at foot, have a yearling still with them and themselves, so they're feeding 3 or 4, they're eating to feed 3 or 4, huge strain on them, whereas the stallions, they just feed themselves, and for a couple of months they're busy doing other things. But those mares are just not present this time, and from where we've mustered from so far, I would have expected to see them. But no, they're in good order this year, so I'm thrilled, and it shows in their liveliness too. Yeah.
Is there any kind of choice on the bands of horses that come in? Do you have a say on, or is it just the luck of the draw that the helicopter comes across? Absolutely. If this herd has a value, it's because it's not managed. So in a way, we're putting a management pressure on it. So what we try to do is make that management pressure as least selective as possible. So, yep, we need, from the count, we figure out we've got to take 60 from this area. We go in and take a whole band, rather than taking the elderly or the young or whatnot, so that there is no selection pressure put on the herd. They're allowed to breed as they would normally, and we take the whole band out, and yep, it's the one that's got first is bad luck. It's your turn, you're out of here.
As the hard-working crew enjoyed a last cup of tea for the day, we were allowed to come down to the holding pens and get a better look at the horses. Getting to see the stockmen working at close quarters was a testament to their high level of skill.
The one thing I've been absolutely amazed by is the organisation, and the musterers are fantastic. They're walking through the horses when they get them in the pens as if they're horses that know people well. There's no fear, there's no anxiety, there's no energy in the musterers, so the horses just kind of go with it and have no fear. They're not kicking out at the musterers, they don't look overly panicked. It's quite incredible to watch that, a wild horse just able to get on with a human because the musterers are so relaxed themselves. And the condition of the horses is actually remarkable. I mean, you can see the kind of grass and sort of tussock that they feed on. And I think this is a positive thing. I hate the thought of culling horses, but I think a positive thing which has come out of this is that the horses that are allowed to roam in this beautiful country certainly have more grass. And you can see the results. They're in great condition.
Being able to gaze at the Kais close up, I also got the opportunity to eye up a mare foal combo I'd seen coming in earlier in the day. When it comes to horses, I'm a sucker for a pretty face, and I'd just fallen hook, line and sinker.
I don't know, because you can't really say what you want, but there's one there that there's just been a few moments between us. She's even got a C on her head for Country 99. Might be meant to be.
After some hasty negotiations, I managed to secure the objects of my newfound love. So as the day wound to a close, there was only the small matter of breaking the news of the already done adoption deal to that poor, long-suffering partner of mine. But that could wait until we returned to cell phone range later in the evening. Right now, I was officially in the early stages of a big old Kaimanawa crush. A total of 191 horses were mustered during our visit, of which the Kaimanawa Heritage Horse Welfare Society successfully rehomed 119. The remainder was sent to the works. Personally, I would love to see all horses rehomed, so if you would like to adopt a Kaimanawa horse from the next muster or make a donation, go to this website. And we'll have more from the Kaimanawa muster in our next episode. Right now, it's time for Hoof Hearted, our YouTube Find of the Week. And in our next exciting episode of Horsing Around NZ, the Kaimanawa crush continues as we follow our combo up country to their new home. Plus, we've got more vet advice, expert opinion, top tips and clever tricks. Don't forget to like us on Facebook. See you then.